we gonna do now?
You don't see the enemy, you don't hear a trumpet, you don't even smell blood, but the ground beneath your feet is alive, and it's about to swallow you. There's a kind of silence before the end. You're a soldier, stationed on the high curtain wall of a stone fortress, maybe at Chateau Gaillard, or the walls of Rochester in 1215. You've spent days repelling arrows, boiling pitch, and fire pots, but now it's quiet. Too quiet. You don't know it yet, but this siege isn't going to end with a sword. It will end from beneath your feet. Welcome to one of the most terrifying and forgotten battlefield tactics of the Middle Ages. The siege mine, a tactic not of glory, but of suffocation, panic, and collapse. Medieval siege mining wasn't speculation. It was standard procedure by the 11th century. It had one goal: to destroy walls from below by digging a tunnel under the fortification, propping it up with wooden supports, and then setting it all on fire. When the timber beams burned through, the tunnel collapsed, taking the castle wall down with it, and sometimes anyone standing on it. According to the Chronicle of Gervase of Canterbury, when Prince Louis of France besieged Rochester Castle in 1215, he ordered miners to dig beneath the south tower. The defenders could do nothing but wait. The besiegers filled the mine with pig fat, 40 of the fattest pigs, to ensure a complete burn. The result? A thunderous collapse. The great southern tower came crashing down. The garrison was forced to surrender. No battlefield charge, no sword duel, just silent earthwork, grease, and gravity. You didn't see it coming. That was the point. Siege mines took weeks to build, slowly, methodically, just outside arrow range. Often, professional miners, not soldiers, were hired for the job, sometimes from Germany or northern Italy, where mining skills were advanced. Once inside the tunnel, it was utter darkness. Air was foul. Miners often died of suffocation or cave-ins. But if they survived long enough to pack in brushwood, tar, and animal fat under the wall's base, they could weaponize the fire to bring the enemy crashing down. And when it worked, it was devastating. At the Siege of Thessalonica in 904, Arab raiders used mining to open a breach in the city walls, leading to a massacre inside. No heroics, just backbreaking, blistering work underground, followed by fire and blood. Imagine the smoke, the roaring fire, the pop and crackle as wooden beams burn and collapse, and then that sudden, groaning rumble, like a beast beneath the earth waking up. Moments later, a stone wall weighing hundreds of tons folds inward, dust exploding into the air. Soldiers above are swallowed into the rubble. You never saw your killer, because he was underground. Of course, castle defenders weren't helpless. They developed countermining, digging their own tunnels to intercept or collapse enemy mines. It was a desperate, brutal countermeasure. You're crawling on your belly in a tunnel only 3 feet high. The air is chokingly stale. If you meet the enemy, it's hand-to-hand combat in pitch black, with pickaxes, knives, or bare fists. The 13th century military manual, De Re Militari, by Vigetius, was reinterpreted in the Middle Ages to include these tactics. One chronicler, writing during the siege of Château de Chinon in 1205, recorded that defenders detonated barrels of water to collapse enemy tunnels, an early form of hydraulic countermining. Sometimes they simply filled a mine with sewage or poison gas, burning sulfur or pitch, to drive the diggers out. It was not war, it was subterranean murder. There's a bitter irony here. Mining, the same practice that built cathedrals and found silver, was now turned against fortresses and flesh. It's not the stuff of legends. You won't see it in fantasy films. There's no glory in dying in a tunnel full of smoke and collapsing rock. But it worked, and that's why they used it. At Rochester in 1215, 40 pigs were sacrificed, not for food, but to burn the walls. Miners were paid more than knights, and died more often. There was no warning, just a sound, like thunder beneath your boots. When we imagine medieval warfare, we picture knights charging, archers volleying, swords clashing, but some of the most devastating tactics came from below, from silence, from suffocation, from fire. The medieval siege mine is all but forgotten, but for those who stood above one, they never forgot it. This isn't strategy, this is rot, panic, and stinging wings. The enemy doesn't wear armor, it buzzes. Not all medieval warfare was fought with swords, arrows, or fire. Sometimes your enemy sent disease. sometimes your enemy sent pigs on fire, and sometimes they sent bees. Welcome to the bizarre, disturbing world of animal warfare in the Middle Ages. Not superstition, not legend, but a set of brutally effective battlefield tactics using biological weapons centuries before the term existed. This was not honor, this was desperation, and it worked. Let's begin with the war pig. Not the metaphor, the real one. In the 3rd century BCE, King Antiochus I of the Seleucid Empire faced a terrifying problem: war elephants. These beasts were battering rams with tusks, almost invincible on an open field. The solution? Squealing, burning pigs. According to Polyaenus, a Macedonian military strategist, the defenders of Megara doused pigs in pitch, tar, and resin, set them on fire, and released them toward the enemy's elephants. The result? Chaos. The elephants panicked, reared, trampled their own men, and broke ranks, not because they were wounded, but because of the screaming sound and the scent of burning flesh. Elephants were used as late as the 13th century in Islamic armies. Burning pigs, or pig effigies stuffed with flammable oils, remained part of siege lore. Pigs were not food, they were firebombs. Next, bees. It may sound absurd until you read the documented examples. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, during Viking raids in the 10th century, monks and villagers defending monasteries would hurl beehives over fortress walls onto attackers. It wasn't just improvisation, it was planned defense. At the 14th century siege of Château de Lorient in France, defenders dropped hornets' nests directly onto scaling ladders. The attacking force broke formation in panic. Bees were especially effective because of the tight armor gaps in medieval mail. A single hive could disperse an entire raiding party, not through injury, but confusion and fear. Now it gets darker. The most chilling use of animals in warfare was not alive. It was dead. During the siege of Kaffa in 1346, a Genoese outpost in the Crimea, Mongol besiegers catapulted plague-ridden corpses over the walls. According to Gabriele de Mussi, a contemporary chronicler, this act sparked a pestilence within the city. The Genoese fled, possibly carrying the Black Death with them back to Europe. But this wasn't unique. In English city sieges, rotting cattle, dogs, and human remains were deliberately dumped into wells to infect water supplies, a tactic known as fouling the well. City laws in York and London forbade this practice, which confirms it was frequently attempted. This wasn't just biology, it was psychological warfare. At the siege of Carcassonne, 1209, it was reported that donkeys were skinned and displayed on poles, dyed red to look like demons. The purpose? To terrify defenders into surrender. Animal remains were often strung along battlements or gates, a primitive form of shock tactic. If you could convince the enemy that plague, sorcery, or madness was upon them, the battle was over before it began. And sometimes it worked. Medieval warfare wasn't fair, it wasn't clean. It was whatever you could do to make the other side break first. So why use animals? Because they were available, cheap, terrifying, and impossible to control, which made them perfect weapons of chaos, and because the enemy didn't expect it. Not even today's fantasy films capture this. They give you dragons, not flaming pigs squealing under siege towers, but it's the pigs that worked. The Middle Ages were not romantic. They were clever, cruel, and driven by the raw need to survive. Burning pigs, buzzing bees, plague-ridden corpses. They weren't legends, they were tactics. They didn't win glory, they won wars. You made it through the siege tower, you breached the gate, you think you've won, but the castle was never designed to keep you out. It was designed to kill you once you got in. Medieval castles are often shown as symbols of chivalry, power, and romance. But that illusion crumbles the moment you look at them for what they really were: weapons. Every stone, stair, and corner could be a death trap, because once you were inside the walls, the real killing began. This is the forgotten battlefield tactic of architectural warfare, using the castle itself as a weapon to eliminate intruders through fire, confusion, and relentless vertical death. The most fortified part of a medieval castle was not its walls, it was its entry point. The gatehouse was often a multi-level trap engineered for vertical violence. If attackers broke through the outer doors, they entered a narrow passage flanked by two walls, locked from both sides, and covered from above. From there, they were subjected to murder holes, openings in the stone ceiling from which defenders dropped boiling oil, stones, or quicklime. Arrow loops, narrow vertical slits in the walls, angled for optimal line of fire with crossbows or longbows. False doors or dead ends, leading nowhere, trapping invaders in tight quarters for easy slaughter. At Caerphilly Castle in Wales, archaeologists uncovered extensive stone channels above the gatehouse, aligned with chute-like structures, perfectly suited for pouring heated sand or oil. You thought you got in? You just entered the butcher's hallway. You're shoulder to shoulder with other men in armor. The stone walls echo your breathing. Then something drips. It's boiling pitch. You look up, just as a stone the size of your skull falls from the ceiling. You never even saw the man who killed you. Staircases weren't just stairs. They were tactical weapons. Most spiral staircases in castles turn clockwise upward. Why? Because a right-handed defender descending the stairs had full room to swing their sword. A right-handed attacker coming up the stairs was cramped against the inner wall, sword elbow pinned. These were not design accidents. They were intentional battlefield decisions built into the architecture. At Conwy Castle, researchers from CADW found that staircase geometry varied by approach direction. Defenders always had the advantage in motion and swing. Even the height of steps was irregular, forcing attackers to stumble when rushing blindly. In certain keeps and inner wards, invaders faced more exotic and deadly traps. Trapdoors over dry wells or pits. You fall, you die. Fire galleries, where defenders could ignite flammable oils pooled along narrow stone channels. Smoke chutes, designed to flood corridors with choking black smoke from burning hay and pitch. These features are recorded in the siege notes of Crac de Chevalier and Chateau de Najac, both of which used false chambers to lure and kill attackers with minimal manpower. At Najac, defenders reportedly routed a larger attacking force through a series of constricted galleries, then lit the air itself on fire. Some traps weren't physical, they were psychological. During the siege of Montségur, 1244, Cathar defenders reportedly faked a retreat, allowing Crusader forces to pour into what appeared to be an abandoned section of wall, only to set fire to the tunnel behind them, cutting off their retreat. In Germanic fortifications, flags were sometimes intentionally flown upside down or hidden to lure enemies into believing the fortress had fallen, leading them into empty courtyards surrounded on all sides by hidden archers. This wasn't mercy, it was performance, a deception, weaponized. The walls weren't designed to keep you out, they were built to keep you in and kill you. Modern warfare favors open ground, speed, and firepower. Medieval warfare favored bottlenecks, darkness, and death from above. Castle design wasn't passive, it was strategically homicidal. These fortresses weren't beautiful, they were brutal. And once you were inside, they didn't protect you, they executed you. The next time you walk through a restored medieval castle, look past the gift shop, past the smooth staircases, past the curated flags, and remember, this place was built to murder people, methodically, invisibly, and without glory. The castle didn't care if you were brave, only if you bled in the right hallway. No fire, no sword, no storming of gates. Your enemy doesn't charge you, he just waits. Because in a siege, time is the blade. In a siege, you don't die in a battle, you die in your bed, of rot, thirst, or madness. Because the most effective and most horrifying battlefield tactic of the Middle Ages wasn't a weapon. It was patience. This is the brutal reality of medieval siege starvation, a war not of armies but of appetite, waste, and surrender through slow decay. And it worked, with devastating consistency. To starve a city was simple: cut off all trade and water sources, destroy crops, salt the fields, block roads with armed posts, and kill messengers. Then wait. At Kenilworth Castle in 1266, royal forces besieged rebels for nearly 6 months. Chroniclers described corpses being thrown into the moat to poison the water. With no resupply and no sanitation, the defenders surrendered in filth and sickness, not in combat. But this was far from the worst. At the siege of Jerusalem in 1099, Crusader chroniclers recorded that starvation grew so intense, defenders ate dogs, donkeys, leather, grass, and even corpses. One account from Fulcher of Chartres describes a man roasting a child. It's almost too gruesome to believe, and yet it's echoed by multiple sources. Imagine the smell of rotting grain, the stench of a blocked latrine, the sound of a child whimpering, not from injury, but from hunger that has lasted for days. The silence of watchtowers where once horns sounded, now manned by corpses. Starvation wasn't passive. It was accelerated by filth. During the siege of Maastricht, attacking forces launched barrels of excrement over the walls to contaminate food and water supplies. The tactic is referenced in city sanitation statutes passed immediately after the siege, a legal response to biological assault. In Neuss, 1474, defenders resorted to boiling animal hides for soup. Disease spread through every corner of the city. Chroniclers noted more deaths by dysentery than swords. In some cases, deserters were caught and catapulted back into the city, dead and bloated. A message: there's no way out. Some sieges broke all boundaries. At Thessalonica, 904, after a long blockade, defenders reportedly resorted to eating their own dead. The Byzantine Chronographia states plainly, the living fed on the corpses of the unburied. At Harlech Castle, 1468, surrounded by Yorkist forces, the garrison survived by boiling horse bones into glue and eating candle tallow. A 16th century Welsh ballad records the siege not as a victory, but as an act of survival through madness. The tactic wasn't just starvation, it was humiliation. If you can make your enemy eat their dead, you haven't just won, you've unmade them. Some defenders held out for months, even years. Others cracked in days. Why? Because siege warfare was also psychological warfare. Attackers mocked the starving. At the siege of Limoges, 1370, English forces displayed roasted meat and fresh bread within view of the walls, a taunt meant to break morale faster than any trebuchet. At Rhodes, 1480, Ottoman forces bombarded the city with drums day and night, preventing sleep. Combined with food deprivation, this induced mass hysteria among the population. The goal was never the wall, it was the mind. Siege starvation cost nothing but time. No need to risk soldiers, no need to storm walls, just wait, while your enemy eats themselves to death. In the modern imagination, sieges are battles of catapults, ladders, and fire. In truth, they were slow-motion acts of annihilation. An entire city brought to its knees by the absence of bread and the silence of blocked roads. We remember medieval warfare as swords and glory. But the tactics that actually worked, they were silent, slow, and inhumanly effective. Mining under walls, burning pigs, castles turned into traps. Cities starved until they forgot what food was. These were not accidents, they were strategies, and they shaped history, not through heroism, but through suffering,